So thanks for joining with us today. I'm sitting here with my sister and good friend, best friend, Audrey Steinley. And we're just going to take a few minutes and talk about a topic that the Lord has put on Audrey's heart. And just give you a little background about Audrey for those of you who don't know. She came to Wyoming with the Beautiful Gait Ministries team to lead a breakout session. And because we only had room in our schedule for all the women to attend 2 of the 4, we wanted to do a video so that those who didn't get to see that, and for those who even weren't able to attend, could come back and see what the Lord put on Audrey's heart to share with us. And so we're going to take a few minutes here, and we're going to talk with Audrey a little bit about what God put on her heart to share with us. And but just give you a little background about who she is. So yes, she's my sister, and I am very proud and grateful for that, and thankful to the Lord that He gave me an amazing sister. But she's also a licensed counselor. She graduated from Southwestern Seminary here in Fort Worth, Texas, and with a double master's in Christian education and family counseling. And I'm sure there's a lot more to that, but that's kind of a summary, right? Of what she got all smart and educated to do. So in that, she learned a lot of ways to practically help people walk and do life in the way that God created us to walk, right? Like God is a God of order, and He created us with a way to function the way He created us to, and we live in a broken world, and so sometimes we mess that up. And so she's trained in helping people see where we get into patterns that create damage in our relationships. And so that's part of kind of where she's coming from here, of just wanting to give people and us tools of how to release the kingdom in conflict. So that's the title of Audrey's topic that she spoke on, is releasing the kingdom in conflict. So Audrey, can you just tell us for just a couple of minutes, just kind of share with us why you chose this topic of conflict, something we don't like to talk about, and how we actually release the kingdom. So,
No, that's great. Thank you. I think conflict is absolutely, hands down, one of the hardest things that we have to deal with. Aside from grief and loss, which is sometimes a part of our conflicts, managing the conflict is probably one of the most advanced things that we have to do as human beings in our adult life. And I like this topic, and even though it is challenging and it's not fun to talk about, it's necessary, because we cannot get through this life without dealing with conflict on some level.
Right.
Even if it's conflict within ourselves. A lot of times what we deal with isn't just conflict with other people, it's also we're internally conflicted about our own values and then what we actually see in ourselves, or we're conflicted with our spirituality, our relationship with the Lord, and we don't really understand why or what He's doing or how He could be a good God if fill in the blank.
Right.
And so all those are just different forms of conflict that even if you go live on a mountain by yourself away from the world, you're still going to have to deal with this.
Yes, the voice in this ear, the voice in this ear, yeah.
You are going to have an internal struggle, and I think as believers, we have an additional tug-of-war within us all the time between what we feel like doing in those moments, how we feel like reacting and defending ourselves and protecting ourselves, and just our knee-jerk reactions that are so normal and understandable most of the time, compared to the Holy Spirit living inside of us and the presence of God within us, how He calls us and prompts us and wants us to act in those moments. Yeah. And it's this tug-of-war within us, and if we don't recognize it or are introspective enough to realize it, we're just going to walk it out how we normally would.
It's good. I think you're right. That I think conflict and how we handle conflict, believers and non-believers, Christians, non-Christians, those who love Jesus or don't know who He is, all of us, human beings, I think that this is one of the things we mess up the most.
Absolutely.
Like how to handle conflict, because you're right. Anybody who's a human living on the face of this earth, whether you're alone or whether you're surrounded by people, when you are with people, you are going to have conflict. It is inevitable.
Absolutely.
And if we don't learn how to handle that, then we really create a lot of destruction, right? Like
exactly.
a lot of issues that could be avoidable. So I guess just the next few minutes, can you just tell us a little bit of what you have learned and how we can? So the title again was releasing the kingdom in the middle of conflict. All right, and that almost seems like an oxymoron, because like you said, we all have those knee-jerk reactions of how we want to respond we're in the conflict or when we feel like we're being attacked or whatever it is. Like we have those. But you're saying, and your title indicates that there's another option to release the kingdom. So first of all, can you just tell us what that means?
Absolutely.
Let's just level the playing field.
I'm so
What
glad.
does it mean to release the kingdom? And then how do we do that in conflict?
No, I'm glad you bring that up because, and I chose this title for a reason because releasing the kingdom is kind of this weird Christianese that believers use. And it doesn't make sense. The kingdom of heaven is really just the presence of God.
That's good.
That's one of the points. It's not some weird supernatural, magical, mystical thing to be afraid of or to kind of frown upon or just raise your eyebrow at. It simply means the presence of God. Because heaven, the kingdom of heaven, is not a place that we go to once we die. It's the presence of a person.
Good.
And the presence of that person is here now today. Now we will, in the afterlife, in the way Christian theology, we will be in heaven. We will be in the presence of God all the time. That's the glory of it. But because we're on this side of the cross, we also get to experience the presence of God here now within us as believers, as the priesthood of the believer, as Peter talks about, and his presence is within us and among us, and that's really the bottom line of what we need to know for our session today and our purposes.
That's good. So that totally makes sense about what it means to release the kingdom. It's just bringing God's presence into your situation, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever situation we're walking, releasing the kingdom is just ushering God into that situation. Now, it almost sounds like an oxymoron to, in the middle of conflict, to bring God into that. Because I know for me, that's the last thing I'm thinking about. I'm just like wanting to react. I have the knee-jerk reaction, like you said. And thinking about God is like a way, way, way afterthought, like in the moment. But you're telling us and you're showing us some tools of how we can, in the middle of conflict, in the middle of it, how we can bring God into it and how we can release the kingdom. Mm-hmm. And so how? I guess my question is getting to that, because that's what you know and how you're really good at helping people stop in that minute and in that moment of conflict and release the kingdom. So how do we bring God into the middle of conflict?
Absolutely. Well, again, I think it's one of the hardest things to do, and it's a great question, because in order to do that, we have to recognize as believers what conflict actually is. For us, conflict is not the typical things of fighting and arguing and pulling and turmoil with one another. That's the typical view of conflict, the symptoms of it.
Yeah.
But for us as believers, conflict is actually a pursuit of unity. And that's the big idea here. That conflict is not a battle. It's not something to win. It's not something just to escape and get away from real quick, to try to avoid pain at all costs. Conflict for us is a pursuit of unity. Biblically speaking, the New Testament church, the early church, and that the New Testament talks about a lot, is just full of how to go about pursuing unity with one another. If you look at how many verses in the New Testament are all about one another, I call them one anothering verses, because it's just full of scriptures that talks about how to teach and talk to and deal with one another. And so we as believers have to first of all recognize what conflict actually is. So when we step into a conflict, we don't define it as a fight or a battle. We define it as a pursuit of unity with someone we love, who God loves. And that's the first and foremost thing. The second thing is to recognize that the kingdom of heaven is within you, like we talked about. It's not just some mystical, vague place we'll get to once we die. It is within you, therefore empowering you to walk in the Spirit or walk in a way that is different from the way you want to walk in that moment. Mm-hmm. And so the kingdom of heaven is within you. Now, what you're actually trying to release the presence of God into is in your domain in that moment. So my domain in a conflict is going to be more around, for our purposes, there's a lot of things in our domains, but God gives us an ability to rule and reign and manage my own thoughts, my own behaviors, my own speech that comes out of my mouth, my emotions, and how I express those emotions in the moment. Mm-hmm. That is my territory that only I can manage for myself.
Right.
And every human being has that same territory. No one else can carry that for you. As much as we might try to pull other people in to try to help us manage that and carry that or self-soothe or soothe us, really it comes down to my responsibility.
Is our domain. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. So your domain is your personal responsibility to rule and reign and manage your territory.
It kind of reminds me of that, the passage in the Bible where Jesus says, before you try to get a speck out of someone else's eye, take the plank out of your own. Look at your own domain. and the things that you can control and things that relate to you. So that's kind of what you're talking about.
Exactly
Is that this? Yeah. Okay.
And there's a lot of great scriptures. One of the main scripture that we talk about in the session is from Paul, Romans 7, and I just want to read it from the Message because it paints a wonderful picture of this internal tug of war between the flesh and the spirit and what we want to do versus the kingdom within us.
Okay.
So Paul in Romans 7 says, again, this is from the Message, "But I need something more. For if I know the law but still can't keep it, and if the power of sin within me keeps sabotaging my best intentions, I obviously need help. I realize that I don't have what it takes. I can will it, but I can't do it. I decide to do good, but I don't really do it. I decide not to do bad, but then I do it anyway. My decisions are as such as they are, don't result in actions. Something has gone wrong deep within me and gets the better of me every time. It happens so regularly that it's predictable. The moment I decide to do good, sin is there to trip me up. I truly delight in God's commands, but it's pretty obvious that not all of me joins in that delight. Parts of me covertly rebel, and just when I least expect it, they take charge. I hate conflict.
Yeah.
I've tried everything and nothing helps. I'm at the end of my rope. Is there no one who can do anything for me? Isn't that the real question? The answer, thank God, is that Jesus Christ can and does. He acts to set things right in this life of contradictions, where I want to serve God with all my heart and mind, but I'm pulled by the influence of sin to do something totally different."
Good. Even just as you read that, it makes me think of, fights that I've had with my husband or my kids, and not fights. We don't fight. We have conversations, right?
We have conversations.
But in that, where it's like the words come out, and you're like, no, take them back. I don't want to say that. Why am I saying that? It's kind of that.
Yeah.
It's the inner. You can see Paul describing that inner conflict that he's having with himself. That why do we act? Like, why do we respond out of that when we know that there's another way?
Yes.
So, like, there's two ways we can react.
Yes.
There's two things we can do. Tell us about those two different options.
Absolutely. So when you ask the how question, those first things of recognizing what you're dealing with is the first part of how. You got to recognize it. And then the next is so you can see these two paths. These two paths, if you walk in the way you kind of want to walk, which is what feels right, you will inevitably take the path of protection. That's the natural, normal reaction to have in a conflict.
Yeah.
The path of protection is fueled by our intention to avoid pain at all cost. And so if you could just zoom into your mind, almost like that Inside Out cartoon that was made,
Yes.
if you could just zoom into your mind and see what's going on in the headspace and the mindset of a person who is just reacting in conflict, the way their emotions are telling them, or the way their core beliefs or their vows that they've taken throughout life, and things they're probably not even aware of, they're just reacting. And our intention, for the most part, as humans, is just to avoid pain at all costs. And we have a couple of different ways that I've kind of categorized in this session on what that can look like. If you zoom into the headspace, typically you're seeing people who are trying to avoid pain by viewing this thing as a battle, first and foremost, that I have to win. I have to win this battle, and I will argue, and I will fight, and I will debate, and I will listen. I will absolutely listen to you, but my intention is to figure out how I can win this battle.
Right. I'm right.
Yes.
You need to know that I'm right.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to listen to everything you say, and I'm going to figure out how I can line it up so that I can win. And thereby, if I can win, I can avoid pain.
Right.
I don't have to sit in the pain of what's coming at me.
Right.
And so that's one way. Another way that a lot of people try to avoid pain in the middle of conflict is through the avenue of escaping it. They'll just try to, what can I do to get out of this as fast as possible? What do I have to tell this person just to make them stop?
Yeah.
You know, just get me out of here. And we have lots of different defense mechanisms that we pull up and we wall off, or we internally, if we can't get physically away from the conflict, we'll internally withdraw ourselves, and we'll just put these fortified, thick walls of defense around the real, authentic self of us. And we might say, you can't hurt me. You might be coming at me, but I can't feel a thing coming through my wall of protection. Because that's the path I'm taking.
Shut down.
Yes, I just shut down. And so you typically have to ask yourself, what do I typically do? If I'm going to walk in the flesh, as Scripture talks about? What's my natural knee-jerk reaction? Am I trying to avoid pain by escaping and say whatever I got to say, just be compliant, just be a yes man, just agree with whatever, and thereby sacrificing anything, whatever it costs to get out of that pain? A lot of times we sacrifice ourselves, and we are so compliant that we're giving up parts of ourselves just to escape and get away from the pain. Other times, You know, you have that winner mentality. I'm going to win this battle. You're sacrificing the other person sometimes. And even your real heart, that's not your heart towards that person, like you said. And you're willing to sacrifice all of that to avoid that pain of the conflict itself.
But in both of those options, it's impossible to, like what we define, release the kingdom, to bring God into it when we are trapped in the, I've got to win and be right, or the I'm going to escape and shut down. There is no room to release the kingdom in that.
Not at all.
Right?
Not at all. That is an atmosphere of death. That path will always take you down to a place of distance, division, and relationship deadness. Things cannot grow in that environment. Within your mind, within your heart, you will get roots of bitterness, and there will come fruit out of you that is just toxic to the environment.
Yeah.
Even though you have the best intentions, you're trying to protect. That's a good intention, and sometimes you're trying to protect other people from themselves, but you're still on that path.
Right.
And it's still going to lead to the same place every time. So that's what we are familiar with. That's what we will naturally do, unless we recognize this other way that God presents us.
Tell us about that one.
That's what we want to know, right? So this other way is a path of growth. So you have the path of protection is what's natural, what is above what's natural, what is supernatural, what is not natural to any part of the fiber of my being,
right,
is to take this path of growth. And that is fueled with the intention of listening so that we can learn and we can locate the person that we're in relationship with. And sometimes it's even locating ourselves. A lot of times it's locating ourselves. And locate is, again, one of those terms we don't use very often in our language. So what I mean by that, that's a term that I've picked up in the counseling world, but it's hands down one of my favorite concepts, and it's a universal concept, but it applies here. So locating is when you are trying to figure out, where am I? Where are you? And that's your intention. You're listening with those ears. Where are you? So if you're, for example, let's say if you're angry at me or I've done something to offend you and you are letting me know, you know, maybe whether it's coming from a place of unmet need in you or an unmet expectation you had for me, and you're letting me know and you're having your knee-jerk reaction, whatever. Am I listening with an intention to figure out, where are you in your relationship, maybe with yourself? And it's like coming out of that. Where are you in your relationship with God? Did I touch on a spiritual wound that you might have? Or where are you in your relationship with me, or with the way you view relationships and how they should work? Yeah. And am I really listening to locate where you are and where I am? If I have emotional reactions in the face of receiving this information, what is that revealing to me about myself? Right. And when we actually listen, and we have so much noise in these moments, but if we can slow down and turn our minds and our hearts to the reality of God's wisdom, and let Him reveal to us where we are in these spheres of relationship with God, with ourselves, and with others, there will be so much wisdom that is released in that moment that we will know then how to love in the midst of this turmoil. And that's what it means to release the kingdom. That's good. And something you just wanted, because as you're describing this, I'm sitting there going, okay, I can see where that moment comes that I have that choice. Like I'm thinking through conflict that I walk through. I can see the moment where I have the choice, and my instinct and everything with me says, nope, protect and convince that you are right. Defend yourself and show them, convince them that your reaction or whatever it is right. I can see that moment of having the choice. I can hear what you're saying. Say, okay, I can pause for a second, and I can try to locate, where is this coming from? Where are you? All that makes perfect sense to me. But then this is where I'm like, but then when I hear where you are, that's where I want to go right back to that other path of, oh, now I see where you are, but let me show you how you're wrong and how I'm still right here. But what you're saying is that's where it takes that supernatural. That's where the Lord has to step in, and He has to, because that's where it goes against our natural of, going back over to, you can choose that path initially, but then jump back over to the other path of protection or I'm right or walls up or whatever. But to stay on it is okay, Lord, I can't do this. I need you to tell me what my next step is. Yes. So maybe there's not a clear 5 more steps to resolution, but the Lord has the next steps. That's absolutely right. And I'm glad you bring that up, because this is going to be more of, because it's such a habit for us to go down the path of protection. So it's going to be, most of the time when I walk through this in my own life, I recognize when I just walked in the flesh. I just reacted. Jumped past. Yep. Yeah. That's just what I did. And then I have to slow down, recognize that I am in a conflict, let it red flag me to turn my heart and mind to this area of listening, learning, and locating, and sit with my God and let Him deal with me. first and foremost, in my own domain first before I try. Because if I can't win the battle in here and let God be the king of my life in here, He can't be the king of my life out there.
That's good.
So I have to give ultimate authority of my unmet needs, of my unmet expectations, and let God be those things to me. And when we think about those 3 circles that was presented at the conference, I have to be able to receive His grace and speak to me and deal with me with all the noise that's coming at me about what this means about who I am.
Right.
Because a lot of times when we're in conflict, it reveals ugly parts of ourselves, or even perceived ugly parts of ourselves. And we have to receive God's grace and goodness to remind us of who we are in Him, so we have security in that, and we can walk through and take that vulnerable step with someone who's upset with us and be okay and take that risk because we are secure in our identity of being a beloved daughter of Christ. And so receiving His grace is a big part of that. And then as I do that, I am experiencing His presence, and I'm letting His presence convince me that my needs are met in Him.
That's good.
And that takes some convincing, and sometimes that takes time, but it also takes a building of trust, and that you eventually develop a personal history with your Lord, with your God, that you become convinced that He is with me and I am okay. And even though, my spouse or my family member can't be this for me right now, my God is with me and I'm secure still. So His experiencing His presence frees you a lot from needing this person to be all that for you, and needing this person and now having to make them be something they were never meant to be in the first place. They weren't designed to carry that, God was. And so those first 2 spheres are vital if we're going to get to that 3rd circle of releasing the kingdom in this moment, because we cannot view eyes of compassion and see this person the way God does if I am too insecure in myself.
That's good.
And I can't, I don't have the freedom because my needs are too loud in the moment.
Yeah.
And I have to be able to take that vulnerable risk, and being able to release the kingdom and getting to that point where you're ready to do that, it gives you an ability to view people and yourself the way God does, not the way we do.
Right.
And that's important. And also being able to hear them and to speak to them with the way God does.
Yeah, so what you just described, it just reminds me of the saying, the cliche, hurting people hurt people.
Yes.
And so when healed people heal people, or, it's kind of that.
Yes.
If you aren't secure in who God says you are, if you're not so used to hearing His voice that when you hear somebody try to tell you what you've done or who you are because of something that has happened, an offense that they have taken up, then the temptation will be to believe in that, or to put stock in it, or to fight against it. And neither one of those is going back. So it's like when you come from a healthy place of, no, I know who I am, and I understand that I have offended you, but let's talk through this, and let's bring God into this. And that's that band, what would Jesus do? We can't do that unless we're secure in who we are. We can't do what Jesus did unless we are secure as Jesus was and who He was to His Father. And so I love that's step 1, is get to know your Father and learn His voice, learn what He says about you, so that when conflict comes and the enemy wants to say, oh, because of this conflict, now this is who you are. He wants to redefine who you are. You're secure enough to say, no, I don't have to get sucked into that. I don't have to take this other path because I know who I am. Now I can really do what Jesus did and bring something better, something beautiful out of this by bringing God into it.
And only God can do that in those moments. We cannot make ourselves or pull other people onto this path of growth with us.
Right.
We have to just get myself and my domain walking in this way with my Lord. And if God can use that in someone else's life, then that's fantastic. But that is God's work, not ours.
That's good.
And so we really have to keep our eyes focused on our domain and not trying to manage everyone else's domains for them, because we know what's good for them. And really focus on what God wants to do in my territory. And how He wants to deal with me. I have a lot of examples. I have to walk this out every single day, which is why I'm really passionate about this topic, because, for example, my husband and I, Butch and I, we have a wonderfully unified marriage, but it absolutely takes this process and this intention. We have to walk this out together, and we've been together for 16 years now, and I would say the last year and a half, 2 years have really been the time we've been able to do this well, and both of us mutually do this well. And so I'm very passionate about it. Yeah. It's a very personal topic to me and to us. So, and for example, one of the things that, which is fabulous at nicknaming people. If he loves you, he nicknames you.
Yes, I know. I'm well aware.
Yes. Even though he calls me Tuffy, that's my normal everyday name. Whenever I'm walking in my flesh, like what we're talking about,
choosing the other path,
taking this path of protection, I've got one of two modes. And I've become very aware of this. I will either wall off and escape, which is my kind of my go-to. But if I feel like that is beyond, and now that's no longer the option, Wolverine comes out. Wolverine. And so that's my other nickname. He's calling me Wolverine.
I've witnessed Wolverine.
Yes, it's very real. It's this ugly part, and it's just
we all have it.
Yeah,
we all have it.
You feel like you get backed into a corner, and you got no other choice but to just come out. And I know where it comes from. I'm aware of all that, but it still happens.
Yeah.
And so there's actually a couple of times that this has happened in our marriage that I think illustrates this really well. First of all, there was this time when this house that we're in right now has been a huge renovation project, and that's it created a lot of communication opportunities for us.
Yeah.
And he's a fabulous provider and a great protector and wonderful at what he does. And he values that as a part of how he takes care of me. And I love that he treasures me that way. And there was this one day I was in the kitchen just working and cleaning, and I had broken the appliance garage door to our appliance garage, and didn't really think much of it because things happen. And he just came home from a really long, hard day of being on patrol, being a cop, and I didn't think much about that. And I said, "Hey, babe, we got some people coming over tonight. Will you find a stick to prop up that garage door because it busted and broke?" And I didn't sit well with him. And he let me know. It's like, well, why am I always breaking things and this and that? And I did not see that coming, and it took me off guard. And my knee-jerk reaction was to come back at him.
Right.
And I shut him down real hard, and we got in this gridlock fight. And we both reacted in our flesh. And we went down this path of protection. We were both trying to protect ourselves from each other.
Right.
And it was pretty painful in the moment over something so frivolous and ridiculous.
The way it is.
Yeah, and so he storms off, and I go my way, and we're just, we've all had those moments. And I start angry cleaning, and I'm just angry cleaning my house, and I recognize and I notice in myself, because I'm working on this speech, right? I'm working on this session, and I recognize within myself that I've got this deep emotional pain that is way out of proportion to what happened. Yeah. My emotional pain just didn't make sense for what we actually just went through. Something so small. So I sat down with God, literally at my kitchen table here, sat down and said, what is that? Because that's a familiar pain. That's not a new pain that just came from this. I'm familiar with that pain, and I'm recognizing it now.
What is it?
Show me, locate me, reveal to me where I am here. Because I've been here, but I don't know where this is. And what's crazy is that God actually showed me something about myself for the first time that I'd never seen before. Yeah, and so he actually showed me that when I see someone who's mad at me, and they let me know that they're mad at me, I translate that to mean that they despise me, which isn't true. Right. Not true at all. I know that my husband values me to the end of the earth. I mean, he would go to the moon and back for me, and I know that. But in the moment, it doesn't feel that way. It feels like this person I love and value and am very close to despises me and thinks I'm the scum of the earth and can't even stand to be in my presence because I'm so worthless. That's me. I added that to the experience. That did not come from anyone, from him at all. And so that was something I had never seen, is that mad equals despise. And that's not true at all. I know I can be mad at people, and there's not a single part of me that despises them. And so recognizing that, and then also recognizing my urge to put fortified walls up and to never let him see the real me ever again, to wall off and protect myself. I noticed that temptation and urge flare up in me from my old self. And so I sat and I prayed, and I just said, God, I need you to be for me in this moment safe, secure, and just fill me with your love so that I don't put walls up. Because if I wall off, I can't receive any love from God or him. And so I did that, and I took a breath, and I was able to go back to Butch and say, and check on him, see how he was doing, and how his day went, first of all. So I wanted to try to locate him. What's going on with him too? And in doing that, I had a softer tone. My whole tone changed, that I didn't try to. I wasn't trying to use skills or anything like that. But because I was seeing myself differently, and because I was seeing things differently with locating, that I was able to act differently, naturally. And so
remembering who you were determined how you react or how you could act.
exactly.
Knowing who we are determines what we do and how we do it.
That's right.
That's what you did. God reminded you of who you were, that you're not despised, that you're fully loved, and that allowed you to then go in a different posture, with a different heart posture back to your husband.
And turn to him in a way that was completely unexpected.
Right.
You know, he didn't expect that. So he in turn softened and was able to tell me how he was doing and how his day went. And then I was able to be vulnerable. And being vulnerable is a very necessary step to take in this process. You've got to learn to be vulnerable and take that risk again. And so I said, hey, I just learned something about myself that I'd never seen before. Do you want to know about it? And I let him sit if he was ready to hear something new about myself. And he could have told me no, that would have been okay, because he's had a long, hard day. We could have talked about it later. But he said, yeah, I absolutely want to know. And so I was able to share that with him, and it took us down this great conversation, this spiritually rich conversation. And so we were able to step back into a place of unity and peace and full, genuine, authentic love after going down the wrong path.
Right. You ushered God into that moment and released to the kingdom there in the middle of it.
Exactly.
It's really good.
Exactly. You know, and that's just a small, trivial example. There's been so many. I mean, we deal with much bigger, scarier things, because he's a cop and he's a SWAT operator, and he gets called out. There's this one week he got called out to just on patrol, just on duty. He responded to 3 shootings in 1 week, and so he's letting me know this stuff, and he was safe. You know, nothing happened. He wasn't really safe. He was in danger, but nothing happened that should alarm me. But every time he would get called out to me, I felt throughout the week my anxiety level kept rising and rising. He finally got to the point where he had 3 days off. He was off from his shift work, and he comes home, and I'm already like an emotional mess, because I'm just on edge from him responding to so many high-risk situations. And then he's sitting here in our living room, and he turns on his police radio, and he's listening to the traffic noise, and lo and behold, there's another shooting. He's not even on duty, and so I start reacting in my flesh. I start getting upset at him for being on duty, off duty, you know, listening and being a part of this, and kind of being wrapped up, because I want him to be off. I want him to be with me, and my unmet needs and my expectations for him start coming out, and I start reacting in that before I even realize what I'm doing. And so the way that actually comes out, well, all that he can see, he doesn't see any of that. All that he sees on the surface is me being this high maintenance. You need to be here with me. You need to fix our landscaping. You need to do this whole laundry list of things. What I was trying to say was I wanted him to be with me. I was scared and I was terrified, but that's not what came out of my mouth. Right. Because I was trying to protect myself. And so, and wanting to protect him too, and not wanting him to put himself in that way of that danger. And in so doing that, we got in this big fight. He could not understand how I was. He knows that I'm not typically so high maintenance, and I was being very much that way in the moment. And so after we had a lot of words and a lot of fight, I finally was able to locate myself again and come to him and say, I'm terrified. I am so scared. And in that moment when he took a breath and let God reveal to him too, and locate me in that moment and see the softer emotions behind my anger. And he just melted, and he said, oh, my baby is afraid that I'm going to die today. Because he did get called out on that SWAT call out, and he had to go suit up, and there was this huge standoff that he had to be right in the middle of. And as I let him know that, as he's walking out the door, he was able to recognize where I really was. He was able to locate the truth of where I was. Right. And that it softened him towards the situation and towards my actual genuine fears of losing him permanently and being in this place all alone. And the fact that he could see that, and that I could be vulnerable, again, to share that with him, helped him recognize where I was, and helped me share where I was. And when you're doing that, you're sharing your location with one another, and you're getting to the authentic, vulnerable place, that is the atmosphere God can use to grow you as a couple, that God can use to grow your relationships into a place of unity and growth and richness, where there's abundant life and love and joy and peace, the fruit of the Spirit that we talk about that can happen in those moments. But if I keep trying to protect myself and put things on him that he needs to do because I'm trying to protect myself or wall off or use Wolverine or Fort Knox to try to get in my way, and he does the same, we will never get there. So those are a couple of things that have really come to my mind. We have to walk this out every day, being good.
I love that, and it's even called a path of growth.
Yes.
It's not a path of get it right the first time.
No.
Like it's a process that you have to walk through, and the more times you walk it through, especially with the same person, like a spouse or a child, or a best friend or a sibling, the more you walk it through with the same person, the more you start being able to have those nicknames and be able to call it out and get to that place of unity. Get to the place where you're releasing the kingdom and God enters in and enriches, because God does call it, what, 2 Corinthians 5, right, where he talks about he's the God of reconciliation, and that he calls us ministers of reconciliation. Well, we can't get to that place. We can't be ministers of reconciliation if we're always choosing a path of protection.
That's correct. Yeah.
But that path of growth, it's not a one and done. It is a time of walking it out and practicing and learning from it. Learning what it feels like and choosing the right path, right? Choosing the other path where God can grow and enrich a relationship.
Absolutely.
And so, I just think
that's the big takeaway. That's the big takeaway. If the big idea is that conflict is a pursuit of unity for believers, then the big takeaway is that when you find yourself in a conflict, you are empowered with a choice. You have an ability to choose which path you're going to take. Are you going to do what feels right, or are you going to take the path of growth and let God help you learn to listen, love, and locate in those spheres.
Right. And even if it is only one-sided, that's okay, because that's still growth within you.
Yes.
And so, that's good. Audrey, thank you so much for sharing with us some tools that you have learned that have really helped me a lot in my adult life, and just sharing that with us today. Thank you for taking time to come share this in Wyoming, and I'm just very grateful for that. I'm grateful that we do have a choice, and that God can be glorified and the kingdom can be released even in conflict. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thanks.